Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are located today. Welcome to today's Scrum Pulse. Just give folks a couple seconds here to trickle in. Thank you all for joining today. My name is Lindsay Vellicino with Scrum.org. I will be moderating today's session, Overcoming Agile Skepticism, with professional Scrum Trainer Mary Iqbal. Welcome, Mary. So happy to have you today. And let's get started with some logistical information so that we know how this works. So your microphones will be muted throughout the session, but we do encourage you to ask questions. So please utilize the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And if you have any technical questions, please utilize the chat. You will be able to access me there for any technical questions that you have. But if you have questions for Mary, please drop them in the Q&A so that they are captured. And this session will be recorded, and the recording will be available within 24 hours. So keep an eye out for that. You will get an email with a link to the webcast page on the Scrum.org website. And let's go to the next slide, Mary, and then we'll dive into the content. So really quick about Scrum.org. We are the home of Scrum. We were founded by Ken Schwaber in 2009. Our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems. We offer training and certification in professional Scrum. We also offer a lot of free learning opportunities on our website, like this webinar, and also videos, our blog, our forums, lots of ways to learn Scrum. So with that, I hope that this session plays a part in your learning journey, and I will hand this over to Mary to introduce herself and kick us off.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, and thank you for having me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mary Iqbal. I am a professional Scrum Trainer with Scrum.org, and I have experience as an Agile Transformation Manager for over 60 teams. I have trained over 1,000 people in Agile Frameworks and have over 20 years in project program management. And I'm also the organizer for Scrum Day, which is scheduled for September 14th, 2023 in Madison, Wisconsin. So you can learn more at scrumday.org. The purpose of today's presentation is to talk about some of the misconceptions which can hold back successful Agile adoption and can even hold back individuals from fully embracing the concepts underlying Agile frameworks. So to get started today, I'm going to start off with what is Agile? And then once we've gone through some introductory content, we're going to ask you to choose your own Scrum venture, which means we're going to have a poll in about a couple minutes here. And you're going to choose which of the topics do you most want to hear about today. And then we'll discuss those topics. And with each topic, we'll allow time for questions and comments. And then finally, we're going to wrap up and give you some information that you can take with you. So starting off today, what is Agile? Right? I think it's important to start off by defining our terms. So Agile is an umbrella term, and it's used to refer to really an unlimited number of frameworks, complementary practices that all are used to deliver incremental value, which means frequent usable value to our customers and to the organization. Agile works best in complex environments where more is unknown than known. So if you could write work instructions to deliver that thing that you're delivering, Agile may not be a great fit. But if you require some creativity, if you're not sure exactly how you're going to do that thing, if outputs are different every time, right, with every deliverable is a little bit different than the way before, and the problem is just a little bit different, and maybe requirements are a little bit different, technology or solution approach is a little bit different, that's where Agile really makes sense, and Agile frameworks and complementary practices. Because Agile is a framework, or an umbrella term, of many different frameworks that can be used to guide teams to work together to deliver creative solutions to complex problems. Agile is, as I said, a framework, and it starts with a mindset of focusing on the benefit that we're trying to achieve. Agile also is described in the Agile Manifesto, agilemanifesto.org. And in that manifesto, there were 4 values that were identified, including individuals and interactions over process and tools. We value individuals and interactions above process and tools. There were 12 principles that were included in the manifesto. satisfy the customer, working software, frequent delivery. And then there really are an unlimited number of frameworks that people use to deliver value in an agile approach. By far and away, the most popular of those frameworks is Scrum. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. In addition to the agile frameworks, there are an unlimited number of complementary practices that you can sort of bolt on and use with each of the different frameworks. For example, teams who are using the Scrum framework frequently write product backlog items in the format of user stories. It's a complementary practice. You don't have to do that, but you can decide which of these complementary practices work best for you in your environment. As I said, Scrum is far and away the most popular of all the Agile frameworks. This information was taken from the Digital AI 16th Annual State of Agile report. And as of that report, 87% of teams who are using Agile are using Scrum. So it's far and away the most popular of all of the Agile frameworks. I think of Scrum personally as the Goldilocks of Agile frameworks. It has just enough structure, but not too much. Scrum allows teams to work together within 5 events, 3 accountabilities, and 3 artifacts to discover the best way to deliver value for them. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to pass the ball over to Lindsay, and she is going to be bringing up a poll. And using this poll, we're going to decide what are we going to talk about today. We're going to put the ball in your court as the listeners to decide which of the topics are most valuable to you. So Lindsay, if you want to bring up that poll, that would be fantastic.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and launch this. You all can go ahead and choose the one that resonates the most with you.
Okay. And these are all common misconceptions. For example, we can't use Scrum because we have to hit a date. If you want to hear more discussion on that topic, choose that. If you want to hear we can't use Scrum, it's too risky, let's talk about that. If you want to talk about this is too important, we need a real plan to get there, right? These are all common misconceptions that we're going to talk about. And if you have one that resonates most with you, or you're hearing this from your stakeholders, select that, and then we'll talk about the most popular voted items are what we're going to talk about. Management will never go for it. We can't deliver working software in less than 1 month. Agile is hard to adopt. Too many meetings. We don't have the time. We work on multiple projects at the same time. We can't use Agile. There's a lot of rework in Agile. I hear that one a lot. Scrum won't work for us. We have to customize it, right? These are all some very common misconceptions about Scrum. If you want to hear these debunked, then vote for your misconception, and we'll talk about it.
Okay, it looks like there's still a few more trickling in. I'm going to give this another maybe 15 seconds here. Looks like it's slowing down. If you have just hopped on, please participate in our poll. This is how we're going to determine our content for today. So you're choosing the statement here that you want to hear more about. Okay. All right.
I've heard all of these at different points, and they're not people who raise these objections are concerned, right? We're trying to do what's best for the organization,
right?
So, right, they're meaning well, so that's why we're going to talk about them.
Okay, I think pretty much everyone has participated, so I'm going to end the poll here, and then I'm going to share our results. Okay. So it looks like we work on multiple projects at the same time.
Okay.
Is the top one. And then we have a lot that are kind of neck and neck. So we have some ties here, Mary.
Yeah.
So I'm going to there's 3 that are at 12%.
All right, we'll see what we can do. I might go with too many meetings. Okay. And because that's an interesting one. So there's an Agile
is hard to adopt, and management will never go for it.
Management will never go for it as our third. Okay.
All right.
All right.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, and I'm going to go to
Okay.
our first topic. We will work on multiple projects at the same time. So we get that one going. Okay. All right. One moment. All right. All right. So here we go. We work on multiple projects at the same time. So I often hear this objection from organizations who are already using Waterfall to deliver projects, or they may be using Agile on some projects, but they're using it only to deliver the project. They haven't established product teams through which value can flow. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this topic, this idea. So let's take a moment and imagine an organization. And the organization has maybe a project management office, which is fantastic. But the project management office is working on projects in a way where they're bringing the teams together, and the teams are brought together to deliver this project, which is a temporary nature. And then the team disbands once the project is over. And so what happens frequently in that kind of environment is, even if you're bringing the team together and they're using Agile to deliver value, there may be situations where individuals on the team are working on more than one initiative. So this visual is really from the Professional Scrum Product Owner class, which is created by Scrum.org. And it talks about the impact when you have individuals working on more than one project at a time. So you can see in the very first here, when an individual is on a single project, they can spend 100% of their time on that project. But when they're on two projects, that first bar represents the amount of time they're spending working on that project. And the second bar, or I should say, on working on each project. And the second bar, the black bar, represents the amount of time that's lost to context switching. So you can see from this chart, when somebody's working on two projects, they may spend 40% of their time on the first project and 40% of their time on the second project, but they're losing 20% to context switching. And this only gets worse. The more projects an individual is on, the more time is lost to context switching. And that's a result of working on projects that are temporary in nature, where you're bringing a team together to deliver that project and then disbanding the project team. A better way to approach this, if you do need to run projects, would be to run those projects, but work with product teams. So for example, if you have a product that is a website, for example, and you have a website, then put together a team that delivers that website and have them work on it. And if there's work that needs to be done for the website, you put that work on a product backlog. So you would create a Scrum team to deliver this product, and the Scrum team would have a product owner, the Scrum team would have a Scrum master, and the Scrum team would have developers. And developers would include all the individuals that are necessary to deliver value for that product, be it a website or human resources or whatever that product is. But bring together the team and get them working together, right? Form that team, give them training, make sure they understand their product, and enable them to deliver value by ensuring that they understand what are their goals, or what's their goal, and what are they trying to accomplish, what's their product, and have that defined. And then work with the product owner to make sure the product owner creates a single to-do list for that team. And that to-do list is called a product backlog. And then any work that needs to be done for that product should be put on the product backlog and ordered by the product owner. So rather than having this context switching that can happen when you have multiple initiatives going on at the same time, and people context switching and trying to figure out, what am I working on today, and what's the deadlines for this project and that project. Put all of your requests on a single to-do list, which is known as the product backlog, and then knock those out one at a time. Because the best way to deliver value is to focus on the highest priority work first. Finish that and then move on to the next thing. When you try and do everything at once, when you have 3 number one priorities, then nothing's important. So establish that product backlog, order that product backlog, and then unleash your teams to deliver value. It really is a better way of working together, but it does require that the organization make some decisions. around what are our products? What are we trying to accomplish here? What's most important? Who are our customers? And then establishing teams that are able to work together to deliver value for the one or more products that may be established for that organization. It's a much better way to deliver value. It's much more efficient, and it focuses on the customer rather than focusing on dates, dollars, and deliverables. We're focused around outcomes. Are we reaching the outcomes that the organization needs? And if not, let's adjust. Let's make changes to our direction. Let's adjust our roadmap. Let's adjust our product backlog. But it really is a better way to deliver value. So I'm going to pause here and ask, are there questions on that particular topic?
There is a question that came in talking about multiple projects. How can we create a sprint goal that will unite the team if we are working on 3 projects at a time?
A sprint goal. Okay.
Yes.
So create a sprint goal that will unite the team if you're working on 3 projects at a time. So I'm assuming, right, that you have a product team, and that product team has work that's associated with projects that may be created on their single product backlog. So in that case, if you're ordering your product backlog according to what's most important to the product owner, then the team will be working on the highest priority first. And if they are, they may just be working on one project at a time, right? And so it depends on how large your team are. But if you have, let's say, 3 projects that have made it into the sprint, right? Worked for 3 projects. Then the team has to determine what's the most important thing in the sprint, right? Because you can't have 3 number ones. And that should be their sprint goal. The sprint goal doesn't have to incorporate every single thing that's in the sprint, but instead what it should do is, what's our most important thing in the sprint? So if I have product backlog item 1, 2, and 3, right? And product backlog item 1 is much more important, then I would probably build my sprint goal around that rather than trying to be inclusive of every single thing that's included in the sprint. Really ask yourselves, what's the most important thing? If we were to choose an objective for the sprint, right, in terms of what's the most important thing for us to get done, what would it be? That is your sprint goal.
Okay, great. Thank you. And there are a lot of questions on this topic. I will ask you just one more just to clarify something. Patrick asked, so are you suggesting that you centralize all work items from the various projects into one product backlog?
So what I'm suggesting actually is the organization take a step back and ask, what are our products? And then form teams around those products. And then if there are projects that remain in the organization, then those project managers would approach the product owners and ask, hey, can we get on your product backlog?
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. Do you want to keep going, Mary?
I'll do that. So let's go on to our next topic, which is 2 meeting meetings. All right, here we go. 2 meeting meetings. We don't have the time. All right, so this is a common misconception associated with Scrum teams. So I want to start off by talking about the events in Scrum. There are 5 events in Scrum, and that can seem like a lot when you first see these, right? The 5 events in Scrum are, first, the sprint, which is a container for all the other events. And the duration of the sprint is 1 month or less, so it is time boxed, which means there's a maximum duration. And the sprint is the sprint length is determined by the Scrum team within that time box. So a sprint can be 1 week, it can be 2 weeks, it can be 3 weeks, anything that is 1 month or less can be the sprint. But there's no meeting for the sprint, so it's really just a container. So within that, there are 4 events within the sprint. There's sprint planning, which happens once at the beginning of the sprint. So if you have a 2-week sprint, there's a one-time sprint planning event. And that event is time boxed at 8 hours or less. Now that sounds like a lot, right? You sound like, oh, am I saying that we're going to have an 8-hour meeting once every 1 week or 2 weeks? No, that's the maximum amount of time for the sprint planning event. I've only ever been to one that actually took that maximum time box. So depending on the length, duration of your sprint, that event is usually shorter. So for example, for a 2-week sprint, it could be around 2 hours. Next, you have the daily Scrum. which is time boxed at 15 minutes or less, regardless of the duration of the sprint. 15 minutes. It's a daily touch base for the developers. And the purpose of that is to increase the likelihood of delivering a done increment, which meets the sprint goal at least once by the end of the sprint. It's really important. But it is only 15 minutes. And it's just a touch base, right? What's going on? How's it going? Are we on track, right? We're not going to problem solve. We're just going to identify, do we have problems? The next event is the sprint review, which again is time boxed at 4 hours, but it is usually shorter for shorter events. I've never been to one that was 4 hours. But usually they're 2 hours or less. Depends on your product, depends on how long your sprint is. And then finally, you have the sprint retrospective, which happens again once at the end of the sprint, and it's time boxed at 3 hours. So the purpose of the sprint retrospective is to improve the Scrum team's effectiveness. This is where we talk about how are we going to do better as a team. So when you lay those out on a calendar, let's look at a sample. What does that look like for a 1 week sprint? What might that look like? If you have a 1 week sprint on Monday to Friday, that might look like a 1 hour sprint planning. Now, I'm not saying it's time box. I'm saying this could look like, this is what it could look like. You might have a 1 hour sprint planning event. Then you might have your 15-minute daily scrum. And then at the end of the sprint, you might have your 1 hour sprint review. And let's say 30-minute, 1 hour retro. That's about 3.5 or 4 hours in a week. That is not a lot. It's definitely not a lot. And the thing about these events is these events are going to reduce the need for other meetings. If you're touching base every day and you're asking, how's it going? Do we have any impediments? And you're taking those impediments as they come and resolving them outside of the daily scrum, you're actually going to save a lot of time. Excuse me. Now, this time doesn't actually show, let's say, refinement. So you might add another 1 hour of refinement on top of that. We're looking at 4.5 hours a week if you include refinement. So it's not a huge time commitment. And these events, the way they're structured, are going to save you other meetings. Let's imagine now that you have a 2 week sprint. What might that look like? If you do not include refinement, then that's about 7 hours in 2 weeks. Again, not a huge time commitment. And these events do save the team other meetings. I can tell you from experience, right? And it feels very light, right? You're meeting every 2 weeks for a 2 hour sprint planning. You're meeting every 2 weeks with your customers and showing, here's what we did, right? What do you think? What's your feedback? Let's adapt the product backlog based on that feedback. And you're meeting every 2 weeks to ask the team members, how are we working together? Is it working out? Do we need to change the way that we're working? How can we improve the way that we're working? So it is a very lightweight framework, as the Scrum Guide says. It's lightweight. There's just enough, but not too much. And that's why I'd like to think of this as the Goldilocks of all of the Agile frameworks. So as I mentioned a couple of times, right? These events, these lightweight events, do save the need for other meetings, right? We're identifying impediments sooner at that daily scrum. The team members are not suffering in silence. You're creating a plan every 2 weeks. You're figuring out, how are we going to approach this? And you're renewing that plan every 2 weeks, because we, as human beings, really can't plan in detail really longer than a month. So we're reviewing that plan at least once a sprint. So it could be 2 weeks, whatever your sprint duration is. And we're getting feedback sooner from our customers, at least once per sprint, whether that's a 1 week sprint or 2 week sprints. We're asking our customer, what do you think? What do you think of what we're delivering? Here's what we've got. What do you think of this? And we can adjust course earlier if needed. So these together are invaluable and do save the Scrum team time, a tremendous amount of time, when those events are used well. The events need to embody the idea of empiricism, which means we're transparent. This is how it's going. Everybody knows how it's going. We're inspecting the work frequently. Those who are closest to the work are inspecting it frequently, and we're sharing that inspection. We're talking about that inspection at the sprint review. And then we're adapting. We're adjusting course based on what we learned. So when the Scrum events really embody the idea of empiricism, that's where we're really going to use the events most effectively. And that's where we're going to really save the most time and make that truly a lightweight framework. So I want to pause and ask questions, comments.
Okay, so let's see. So there are a lot of questions that came in here. A lot of them are still on the different projects. There's a comment here. The reason for too many meetings is that there are a lot of meetings outside of the Scrum events as well. That does happen.
That does happen. And my advice to that is if there are a lot of meetings happening outside of the Scrum events, I would suggest discuss that in the retrospective. Why are we having so many meetings outside of the sprint events? Is it because we're not doing a good enough job of refinement so that we don't know what is in the product backlog or what is being asked for each product backlog item? Or is it because we're not planning well enough? So that's a very common, I would say, issue that newer Scrum teams tend to face, which is not using the sprint planning event to its highest level, right? So ask yourselves, when we go into the sprint planning event, are we really doing the three things we need to do there, which is, are we selecting the product backlog items we're delivering? And furthermore, are we creating a plan for how we're going to deliver those product backlog items? We can't just select them and say, that's it. We need a little bit more than that. We may need to plan. How are we going to approach this? Who's going to do what? What are the things that we're going to do? So at the sprint planning meeting, you're selecting product backlog items, you're creating a plan for delivering. And then, of course, as we discussed earlier, you're creating a sprint goal, which provides focus for the sprint. So if you're spending a lot of time outside of the Scrum events in meetings, you may not be making proper use of the events. Take a look and discuss that in your retrospective. Again, the most common culprits there are refinement may not be doing enough to identify the details, order, and size of product backlog items. Sprint planning may not be getting into the how as much as it needs to be doing. And also your daily Scrum. Are you being transparent there? Are developers talking about what is our plan for the sprint and how is it going? And really using that time to plan for the next 24 hours in a very streamlined fashion. If you're not using the events properly, you may be spending too much time in those additional meetings outside of the Scrum events, trying to catch up.
Okay, thank you. And another question here. I find that during sprint planning sessions, it is hard to keep developers engaged when not discussing their work. Is there any way to avoid this?
I would wonder if your team's too large. So a lot of times, Scrum teams are typically, 10 or fewer. When you get a larger Scrum team, it can be hard to stay engaged with that larger team. So that's one suggestion that I might have for you. And then I might also think about when you're putting together your plan, do you have a whiteboard, a shared whiteboard, or something that the team can really use to center their discussion around that?
Okay. Thank you.
I want to add one final thought on the previous question about engagement in sprint planning events. You might consider different techniques around facilitation. So the Professional Scrum Facilitation Skills course, which is recently released from Scrum.org, is a great option. We do talk about some different facilitation techniques that can be used specifically in sprint planning events. So take a look at that course. That might be something that you're considering that you might be interested in. I would also recommend Liberating Structures as some great tools around facilitation that you might consider and apply to sprint planning as well.
Okay, thank you. Great. Okay. I think we can move forward.
All right, so let's go to our next topic then, which is, management will never go for it. So let's head on over there. Here we go. And, okay. All right, management will never go for it. So when engaging leadership, right, on as an implementation for Scrum, or I would say a new implementation for Scrum, some things that you can do is focus on what Agile does best, which is the delivery of value sooner in smaller increments. So when the 16th annual State of Agile report came out, the number one reason that organizations adopted Agile was to deliver value sooner, and the second was to increase predictability. And these are things that Scrum does particularly well. Is we're going to deliver value sooner, and we're going to deliver just what you need, the highest priority work. And then get training for the leadership team so that they understand how best to empower those agile teams. There can be a lot of uncertainty with a new agile transformation. Leaders not understanding how to engage with the team. What is the best way to empower those teams? How do we support agile teams? So a lot of that can be cleared up with training. And then focus on promoting self-management with guardrails, right? What are the guardrails for our organization in terms of how we're going to use Scrum? When you're adopting Agile, consider this as a change initiative. I like to consider this as a change initiative. So identify and communicating, why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve with an Agile transformation? And then communicating, right? Communicating the why to all of the stakeholders who are engaged in that Agile transformation. And then talk about what's in it for me. What are the benefits that I am trying to get from an Agile transformation? So from a senior executive standpoint, it may be deliver value sooner. From the team member standpoint, it may be a more sustainable pace, right? A more logical approach to the way I work, more empowerment for how I deliver value day to day within the organization. And then focus on change management, communicating that what's in it for me, getting stakeholder feedback, and adjusting course based on how is this going? And then empower your teams with training and coaching. So again, right, that 16th annual State of Agile report, I think is really intriguing. Accelerating time to market, the number one reason organizations switch to Agile. And then predictability, making sure that we know, right, we can forecast where are we going to be? Where are we going to be in 6 months? Where are we going to be in 9 months? So that predictability. It's not that we're sticking to a plan. It's that we're adjusting to a plan and we're smoothing out the flow of our work by using an Agile approach. And then my personal favorite, lowering risk because of the way that we're approaching our work, because we're delivering more frequently and in a more incremental approach, so smaller batches that are done and usable functionality. We're lowering risk for the organization by identifying technical issues earlier. So we're not waiting till the end to try and integrate everything together and only to find out that it doesn't work, right? We're finding those issues sooner, and we're able to adapt much more quickly because we don't have a lot of half-baked work. What we're delivering is done, and we can change direction as more becomes known. So taking advantage of that approach for incremental delivery to take advantage of positive risks, right? And to reduce the impact of negative risks. When you're talking to managers, right, think about from their perspective, what is it? How is it? What is the manager's role in Scrum? I think that frequently is something that comes up from the manager's perspective. What do I do here, right? When we're in an Agile environment, you hear a lot like there's no such thing as a manager in Scrum. Well, that can certainly make me a little bit hesitant, right? But there is a need for leadership to support Agile teams, right? Leaders can promote self-management, promote self-organization. That doesn't mean that the leaders go away, right? But their role is different. Leadership can reinforce clear accountabilities. They can create that culture of trust, making sure that the team is really, really living and supporting those Scrum values, supporting the Scrum Master, and making sure those Scrum values are adopted and really lived by the Scrum team. Fostering problem solving, asking open-ended questions, being servant leaders. That's what we need from our leadership team. Ensuring that Scrum teams are able to work effectively, making sure that they have the tools that they need. Removing impediments. This is critical. This is where leadership really can focus on. What is holding the team back? Do they need another test environment? Do they need more training? Do they need additional resources? What is it that they need? And then helping to get that for them, and ensuring that people are able to innovate within the Scrum team. They feel empowered. So there is a place for leadership, and making sure that they understand that place can be very important to an Agile adoption. Okay, now questions on that topic.
So this question that came in, try to summarize this the best that I can. How can we increase the participation of our management in reviews? We created a public calendar where interested people can join the reviews. We work with a published project canvas, but it doesn't seem to be enough. Less participation of management and stakeholders makes the team think that their work is not worth it.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's a difficult question. So number one, I worry about the idea of having an open calendar for reviews. I think, in my opinion, that the product owner, this is their most valuable event, and they need to determine who they want to invite to those events. So rather than having just a free for all, which may make managers unsure which one they should go to, ask the product owners to do some stakeholder analysis. And when I look at stakeholder analysis, I think about interest level, right? And I also think about influence over the product. So those individuals who have a high interest and a high influence level, those are individuals that the product owner needs to closely monitor, to reach out to them, to make sure that they're proactively invited to that sprint review. And then the product owner should talk to those stakeholders, and including managers, and talk to them about, what do I need from you? What are the expectations when you go to a sprint review meeting? It's not just a presentation. This is an opportunity for us to show what we've done, yes, but also to get feedback. And we're looking for that feedback. That's what guides us. So I think setting those expectations and asking either the Scrum Master or the product owner to talk to those individuals about what are the expectations, how do we engage in the sprint review. But I'm concerned with this idea of just having an open calendar. I'd rather see much more proactive outreach to those managers from the product owner's perspective, to make sure that they know that their attendance is requested at these events. And then also from the Scrum Master's perspective, to make sure that they understand that these are not just reviews. These are important events where we're engaging and getting feedback. And that feedback is what guides us. And we can't have a productive event if we're not inspecting and adapting. And part of that adapting is getting that feedback. So setting those expectations up front. Let's see, I think the other thing I would do is ask yourselves, are those events engaging? And what I mean by that is you don't have to go through every single product backlog item that was delivered in the sprint, right? Make sure you're hitting the highlights. You don't want them to get dull. And then make sure that during the event, you're using facilitation techniques that request that feedback. So some that I'll just share with you some ideas that you might have. You might have, after every product backlog item or everything that you're presenting, that's a feature or whatever you're presenting, ask stakeholders, what do you think? Is that helpful? Right? Ask as you go through the review. Don't wait till the end. Give us a thumbs up, thumbs down. What do you think about this one? And then present the next one. What do you think about this one? That'd be one way to get stakeholder feedback. You can also ask them for feedback on your roadmap. Right at the end of the sprint review, what do you think of this roadmap? Would you vote on upcoming features? Make sure that those events are actually engaging. So I have a great article on this topic. If you go to Scrum.org /Mary-Iqbal, I do have an article about ways that you can get stakeholder feedback in the sprint review. And there's lots of different options there, by feature, different things that you can consider at the sprint review to make sure that those are engaging. So summing that up, right? Do some outreach. Don't just passively say, here's the calendar. Do some outreach and identify those stakeholders whose feedback that you would most like to have. Make sure that they understand that this is not just a review, it's an inspect and adapt event. And then make sure your event is engaging, right? That you're talking about the most important things and you're asking for feedback, because you need to ask, right? It doesn't just happen by itself. So those are just a couple of tips. And then check out my article for some facilitation techniques and tools that you can use for more engagement. Other questions?
Someone asked for a clarification. You mentioned guardrails earlier. Could you give some examples of those guardrails?
Absolutely. Well, actually, we're going to hit up on my next. I think we will have. Do you think we have time for the one more topic after this? Because
I think we could probably squeeze in that last topic. Yes, and that topic was
It was Agile is hard to adopt.
Hard to adopt, yes.
Okay, so let's go to that because that is in part of that topic. I discussed that. So here we go. Let me go over to that slide. All right. Agile is hard to adopt.
So we're going to talk about guardrails as part of this. Here is one way that you can go. Now, every Agile transformation is different, okay? Every transformation is different. But I think when we say that Scrum is hard to adopt, what we're really saying is, I don't know how to go about this, right? This is intimidating for me. So I have laid out a little roadmap that you might consider. Now, keep in mind here that every transformation is different. So you are absolutely going to need to adapt this based on your own needs. But when I think about an Agile transformation, I think about these sort of roadmap steps. And each time it's going to adjust. I think about first asking the question, is Scrum or is Agile really the right fit for your business problem? Is this really a complex problem? And then if the answer is yes, making sure that you talk to leadership and get some buy-in for this. We want to use Scrum, we want to use Agile. And getting that buy-in. Is this the right fit? And is this the right fit for your business problem? And part of that includes, is there support for this? Once you have that, then you're going to define your products, as I mentioned earlier. Start with your customer, right? What are our products? What are we trying to do here? And then once you've done that, identifying the resources that are needed to deliver that product. So for example, if my product is a website, then maybe I need content writers and developers and testers and maybe DBAs and designers and the different types of folks that you're going to need to deliver that product. Bring them together. And then prepare to allow that product team, that those individuals that are beyond the product Scrum teams, prepare to allow them to self-organize by setting guardrails within which they're going to be allowed to self-organize. And so some sample guardrails might be, we want to make sure that every team is cross-functional. We want to make sure that every team is round 10 or fewer. We want to make sure that every team is, whatever those guardrails your organization wants to set. Now, some of them may be restatements of the Scrum framework. Some of them may be more, right? Those guardrails are set by the management typically. So some common guardrails, I mentioned a few, but some organizations will say, we need a mix of senior and junior developers on a team. We need a mix of senior and junior testers on a team. Whatever those guardrails are, that's what I'm talking about when I say guardrails. And then Scrum training for everyone, making sure that everybody understands, how do I use Scrum? And then a self-organization session can be helpful. And then we start sprinting. So I'm going to walk through those steps very briefly because I know that we are a little bit short. I guess we have a little time for it. So when considering is Agile the right fit, you ask again, is this a complex business problem? Scrum is the best fit when requirements are somewhat far from agreement and technology is a little bit uncertain. That's when Agile is a great fit. When you define your product, start with the customer. If the customer is a car manufacturer, then maybe the product is a tire. If the customer is a commuter, maybe the product is a car. Identifying those resources that we talked about a little bit earlier and spinning through these kind of fits fast, and then setting your guardrails. Some of these guardrails can be simple restatements of the Scrum framework to make sure that folks understand and that we're reinforcing that framework from the beginning. Some of those frameworks can be, or some of those guardrails may be budgetary. The product owner will have a budget of XYZ for the product. It just depends on the organization. Identifying the right Scrum training. So for those who are new to Scrum, applying professional Scrum can be really a fantastic training for those who are just beginning their transformation journey. I think that's just a great class. And then you have professional Scrum Master for the Scrum Masters of the team, or for those who are interested in the Scrum Master accountability, leadership can take that. And the professional Scrum product owner class for product owners or those who are interested in that product owner accountability. So lots of training options. Let them self-organize, right? And that's where they determine what teams, how many teams are we going to have? Who's going to be on each team? And then start sprinting. So those are some sample steps that you can take for adopting Agile. And that, I think, addresses your question around guardrails. So I'm going to pause for a second and ask, are there other questions that we want to talk through that have come up?
Oh, So this question, I have experience with some companies that after their training said that the culture of their company is too rigid and based on waterfall project management. What do you suggest to do to start working on the company's culture?
Okay, fantastic question. So culture is extremely important. Without a culture that is promoting self-organization, it really limits the ability of Scrum teams to deliver value. So the first thing I would do is start talking to the leadership team about this. I think I would consider asking some executives to attend that professional agile leadership so that they understand. A lot of times this has to do with a mismatch, right? A lot of leaders and executives and managers have 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 become very successful using a certain leadership style, and that leadership style may be command and control. It may be a little bit more task oriented, task management, and they've been successful with that. And it can be hard for them to change their leadership style. That can be a scary thing. And so talking to them about this idea that the business problem determines the right leadership style. And when we are working in complex products, we need that creativity. And so changing the leadership style is going to be important, moving more towards a servant leadership style and making sure that they understand that, it's a mismatch when you're trying to have command and control and at the same time asking for creativity and problem solving from your teams. It's a mismatch. So if simply start by talking about it and then direct some of them to attend that professional agile leadership class where we really talk about why is this necessary? Why do we need to change from a command and control style to a servant leadership style? And how do I do that? Right? What are some tools that I can use to make that adjustment? And what is my role? If I'm not doing task management, what am I doing? How do I provide value? I think starting with a little bit of empathy for leaders who are struggling with that change can really go a long way.
That's great advice. Empathy is definitely important.
Yeah.
So there's another question. Can you give more examples about how to achieve more self-organized team? The problem that I face in my team is that the work during the sprint is not transparent enough for the other team members. In the daily scrum, every member says that the work is on track and everything is fine.
Okay. So that's a great question. I love that you're asking it. So during the daily scrum, it can, if it's turned into, yeah, I'm fine, no impediments. Yeah, I'm fine, no impediments. I think discussing that in the retrospective first, for starters, right? And identifying this as an area that needs improvement in the first place, I think really is step one. And talking about the impact that this is having. Why is this a problem? Well, it's limiting our creativity, right? It's holding us back from really working together as a team. So number one, spotting that as a problem, discussing that in the retrospective, and then asking team members to be more open. It's a little bit scary, right? It's a little bit scary to say, I'm struggling with something, or this is taking longer than I expected. But normalizing that and saying, yes, it's okay. And reinforcing this idea that if one person is struggling with a product backlog item, it's not just their problem, it's the team's problem. And therefore, we need to talk about it. And then setting that expectation, the daily scrum is not just a checkpoint. It's not just a percent complete or yep, I'm fine. It's supposed to be a collaboration meeting. So I think they may not know that. And so discussing that at the retrospective to me is really a great place to start, setting that expectation that this is not supposed to be just a checkpoint. And here's why. It's because we all own this problem and we all need to work together and unlock that creativity as a team. And setting that expectation and discussing about it. And then hopefully the team will agree and adopt that as their improvement item, right? For the next sprint. We're going to use that meeting for a little bit more than just a checkpoint. Another thing you can do if that doesn't work, you can embrace this idea of tasking out your work, creating on the sprint backlog, making the plan more transparent by adding additional tasks that may be associated to deliver each product backlog item so that individuals can at least see them on the board. And that can be an entry point for further discussion, right? So if you've got your tasks on the product backlog items that are visible on your sprint backlog, then that can be an opening for further discussion on how are those tasks coming along? Can I help you with that task? Or, right, if none of that works, you might try pair programming and actually pairing up developers so that from the get-go, you don't have just one person assigned to each product backlog item. You may have two assigned to that individual product backlog item, and that really encourages them to work together. So those are some different options that you may try. All of those need to be discussed in the sprint retrospective so that you can set that expectation of, here's what I see as a problem, and here's some ideas that maybe we could use to address that problem. Here's why I see that as a problem. What do you think, team? And discuss it.
Okay. Thanks, Mary. And you had mentioned pair programming, and I actually dropped the link to your most recent blog on that into the chat for everybody as well. Okay, so how do you handle the pressure and deadlines for management for deliveries that hamper Scrum team output?
Okay, deliveries that hamper Scrum team output. Like I'm sitting here
Pressure
wondering,
from deadlines.
Oh, okay. All right, so pressure from deadlines. So what I would do there is make sure that the product owner is creating a forecast, right? So the product owner owns the product backlog, which is the plan for the team. This is what we're doing. Here's our list of things that we're going to be doing. The product owner owns the content and ordering of the product backlog, and the developers own the sizing of the product backlog. And that product backlog is the plan. And that plan has everything that you need to forecast when you combine it with, previous work pace, right? So making sure that the product owner is creating some kind of forecast. It can be in the form of a roadmap, which shows here's what we're going to do, and here's our current forecast for when we're going to be there. So communicating that out, putting together some kind of forecast, a roadmap, a burn up, cumulative flow diagram, whatever it is, but communicating that out so that rather than having leadership coming and saying, here's our deadlines, which is fine, but making sure that the product owner takes that information, puts together a roadmap and says, here's my plan. Here's where we're going to be, and here's when we're going to be there, and communicating that out much more frequently. And then inspecting that forecast or that roadmap at the sprint review so that leadership has that predictability, and then adjusting it as more information is becoming known. My tip there is communicate. Put together that forecast and make sure that is made accessible to your stakeholders.
Great, thank you. Okay, this question, we have time for maybe one or two more questions here. We have 5 minutes left. So when a backlog item enters the product backlog, how do we ensure that the item is placed correctly? Do we have a meeting for each entered item so stories, subtasks are created accurately, and once ready for sprint, it is actionable ASAP? Mindful, a meeting template for this type of meeting would be beneficial. Thanks, Alan.
All right. So number one, I would say the product owner decides what is really accountable for the content and ordering of the product backlog. So the product owner is the one that decides what gets added to that product backlog. And they may delegate that. They may empower someone, business analysts or developers or testers to add work to the product backlog item. But I want to make sure that when we say we're going to have a meeting to add to the product backlog item, that it's clear that there is one person who's accountable for that, and they're able to decide what goes on the product backlog item or the product backlog. They may delegate, but they're the ones who are accountable. So I want to make sure that when we say we're having a meeting, it's not that I want to make sure that it's clear who owns that, right? So it's the product owner. And then number two, right? If you do need to refine and add details and order and size to items in the product backlog item, in the product backlog, I would suggest a refinement meeting. Refinement is the act of adding content, order, and size to items in the product backlog. And that can be a meeting, right? Where we're going to meet once a week with certain, all or some of the Scrum team. And we're going to size, we're going to review, we're going to add detail, we're going to discuss items in the product backlog. Or it can be individuals going out there and refining the product backlog on their own. But I just want to clarify, right? That refinement meeting would be a great way to add that content, detail, and size once it's been added to the product backlog item, or even to brainstorm new items for the product backlog. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
If we did not answer your question, please let us know, Alan.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are about at time, and there are a lot of unanswered questions. So I'm going to share all of those with Mary, and then she can address them with you separately if you did give your contact information when you signed up. So with that, I think we should move to our close.
Okay, fantastic.
All right. I want to, here we go. 80. All right.
Okay, so Lindsay, I'm going to pass the ball to you.
Okay, so each accountability has clear learning paths. So take a look at our website. You can check out the learning paths for some additional learning and resources there. And I do want to drop a quick link here for everyone, if you wouldn't mind. I am dropping a link to a survey that Scrum.org has out there right now. This survey is focused around content and content topics, levels of content, the different medium that we deliver our content for you. So please share your inputs there. We would really appreciate that. And then next slide, Mary. Hey, please stay connected with us through our social media channels, our forums, attending more webinars like this one. And yeah, don't be strangers. So with that, I'll hand this back over to Mary for some final words, and then we hope to see you next time.
All right, thank you so much, Lindsay. I want to say thank you, everybody, for joining. I just want to share with you my website. If you want to follow up or sign up for my weekly email, it would be fantastic. Sign up at rebelscrum.site. And I want to also remind you about Scrum Day. This is a one-day conference scheduled for September 14th, 2023. I certainly hope to see you all there at Scrum Day. If you are interested in signing up, I'm dropping a link, www.scrumday.org, for more information or to sign up. Thank you so much, and have a fantastic rest of your day.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and Scrum on.